Okay, let's get right into this. I want you to picture this scene. Dallas, Texas. There's a massive cheering crowd of about 200,000 people lining the streets. It is a beautiful, sunny day, and the atmosphere is just absolutely electric. At the center of it all is the youngest elected president in American history, smiling and waving from an open-roofed limousine. It feels like a moment of absolute triumph for him. But in just a matter of seconds, this incredible scene of celebration is going to violently shatter, transforming into a tragedy that will literally haunt a nation for over 6 decades. Welcome to our explainer on America's darkest murder mystery, the assassination of John F. Kennedy.
We're dropping right into that open-roofed car at exactly 12:30 p.m. on November 22, 1963. The presidential motorcade makes a left turn past the Texas School Book Depository in Dealey Plaza. And then, suddenly, the sharp crack of a rifle cuts right through the applause. 3 shots in total. The first one misses, but the second strikes President Kennedy in the neck, passing through to hit Texas Governor John Connally. Then comes the devastating third shot, striking the president in the head. In an absolute instant, the sunny glow of Dallas turns into sheer, terrifying chaos.
The next 48 hours were, frankly, an absolute frantic blur. At 12:30 p.m., the president is shot. By 1 p.m., despite desperate efforts over at Parkland Memorial Hospital, he's declared dead. Just 15 minutes after that, Dallas police officer J.D. Tippit is gunned down by the prime suspect. And then, less than 2 days later on November 24th, that very suspect is murdered. This wasn't just a political assassination, it was a cascading collapse of order that immediately planted the seeds for a massive, enduring mystery.
All right, Section 1, the rise of JFK, the man and the target.
You know, to really understand the motive behind a world-changing crime like this, we have to look closely at the victim. Kennedy was an absolute powerhouse of charisma and resilience. We're talking about a World War II hero who literally towed injured crewmates to safety with his teeth after a Japanese destroyer split his boat, the PT-109, completely in half. He won a Pulitzer Prize, and in 1960 he dominated the first ever televised presidential debates against Richard Nixon, just by looking remarkably calm, collected, and visionary on camera. So, when he uttered this famous quote at his inauguration, he wasn't just inspiring a nation, he was aggressively shifting the political landscape of the 1960s toward his highly centralized, active style of leadership.
Moving right along to Section 2, the Cold War crucible, building enemies.
Being the president during the height of the Cold War meant every single decision had, well, world-ending stakes, and that built up a massive web of resentment against him. A lot of this started with the disastrous Bay of Pigs invasion in 1961. So the CIA had trained anti-Castro Cuban exiles to invade Cuba. But as those exiles landed and faced heavy fire, President Kennedy point-blank refused to provide U.S. air support. Within 2 days, the exile forces were totally crushed. The source material notes that this huge embarrassment deeply fractured JFK's relationship with the CIA. Intelligence officers really felt he lacked the courage to take open military action.
And the geopolitical paranoia of this era? It was astonishing. The U.S. government was so desperate to remove Fidel Castro from power that they placed a jaw-dropping $100,000 bounty on his head, with tens of thousands more offered for his brother Raul and Che Guevara. It just highlights the extreme, almost unthinkable lengths the intelligence agencies were willing to go to during this period.
And that tension almost boiled over into literal human extinction during the 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis. While JFK opted for a naval blockade and secret negotiations, an exhausted Soviet submarine captain who was under U.S. depth charge fire at the time almost launched a nuclear torpedo. Literally, a single officer named Vasily Artapov was the only thing that stopped the launch. Now, Kennedy eventually navigated the crisis through those secret back channels, but intelligence hawks were absolutely furious. They viewed his preference for diplomacy over military strikes as a highly dangerous sign of weakness.
So as you can see, JFK was a president of deep contradictions. Depending entirely on who you asked, the American public largely adored him. He pushed for strong civil rights, spurred a massive 5.5% GDP growth, and boldly promised to put a man on the moon, flooding NASA with funding to get it done. But internally, the CIA and foreign policy hardliners felt he had just completely backed down to the Soviets. Furthermore, his push against racial discrimination deeply angered powerful political factions in southern states, particularly in Texas.
Which brings us to Section 3, the suspect and the silencer.
This complex web of public adoration and deep-seated internal hatred brings us right back to Dallas and to the man authorities immediately zeroed in on following the shooting. Dallas police searched the Texas school book depository, found a rifle, and conducted a roll call. Guess what? Only one employee was missing, Lee Harvey Oswald. And Oswald's background was, frankly, a gigantic red flag. He was a former U.S. Marine who received an undesirable discharge after actually defecting to the Soviet Union for 3 years. He was steeped in Marxist ideology. Ultimately, he was arrested in a nearby movie theater after his gun jammed while trying to shoot at the police who had cornered him for the murder of Officer Tippit. But then, just 2 days later, the whole story takes this unbelievable turn. While being transferred through the basement of police headquarters, completely surrounded by armed guards and media, Oswald is shot point-blank by a local nightclub owner named Jack Ruby. Staggeringly, this was the first known human killing ever broadcast live on television. Millions of Americans watched the prime suspect get silenced in real time. Now, Ruby claimed he was just upset over Kennedy's death, but for the public, this smelled exactly like a cover-up to keep Oswald from talking.
All right, Section 4, the enduring conspiracy theories.
Now, I want to be super clear here. We are going to impartially explore the claims presented in the source material without endorsing any of them. Our goal is just to explain why this case remains so fiercely debated today. In 1964, the government's official inquiry, the Warren Commission, concluded that Lee Harvey Oswald acted entirely alone. But the American public overwhelmingly rejected that narrative. A massive 65% of the public believed that powerful people were involved in a broader conspiracy, leaving only 35% who accepted the lone gunman theory. This profound lack of trust is really the engine driving the whole mystery.
So, who did that 65% actually suspect? Well, the theories outlined in our source material generally point to 4 primary suspects: the CIA, the American Mafia, Vice President Lyndon B. Johnson, and foreign adversaries like the Soviet Union and Cuba. Let's break down the logic behind these specific claims.
First up, the CIA theory. As we discussed earlier, there was severe bad blood after the Bay of Pigs, but the source material highlights a much more tangible detail. When Oswald traveled to embassies to meet with KGB officers right before the assassination, the CIA actually knew about it, yet they allegedly hid this critical intelligence from the Warren Commission. Theorists argue the CIA either let it happen through gross negligence or actively orchestrated the removal of a president they deemed a Cold War liability.
Next is the Mafia theory. Before Castro's revolution, organized crime had poured fortunes into Cuban casinos and hotels. They lost the whole shebang when Castro took over. According to the source, the Mafia wanted Castro gone immediately, and they were furious when JFK began seeking diplomatic peace talks instead of taking military action. Because the Mafia had previously been contracted by the CIA for anti-Castro plots, theorists suggest they used these murky connections to exact revenge on Kennedy.
Then we have the internal political theories. Some point to Vice President Lyndon B. Johnson, noting how swiftly he took the presidential oath aboard Air Force One before Kennedy's body was even properly returned. Others even point to future President George H.W. Bush, noting his alleged presence in Dallas as a CIA asset at the time. Essentially, these theories suggest an internal power grab by those who stood to gain immensely from Kennedy's sudden absence.
Adding fuel to this whole speculative fire are these genuinely bizarre, unidentified figures caught on camera in Dealey Plaza. For instance, you have the babushka lady, a woman seen calmly filming the assassination while everyone else dove for cover. She has never been identified to this day. And then there's the umbrella man, who stood near the president's car holding an open black umbrella on a perfectly sunny day. Some theorists claim this was actually a visual signal to the shooters.
And maybe the most chilling detail we found in the source material involves a former intelligence agent named J. Garrett Underhill. Shortly after the assassination, Underhill allegedly told a friend he feared for his life because he knew of a CIA plot behind the murder. Just 6 months later, he was found dead in an apartment with a gunshot wound to the head, which was officially ruled a suicide. It's anecdotes exactly like this one that ensure these theories absolutely refuse to fade away.
Section 5. The JFK Records Act.
Fast forward to the modern era, and the public demand for the truth finally forced the government's hand. Back in 1992, Congress passed a law ordering the declassification of all documents related to the assassination, hoping to finally clear the air. And the sheer scale of this effort is just mind-boggling. The National Archives has processed a staggering 600,000 pages of documents related to the Kennedy assassination. You would think that over 500,000 pages of raw intelligence would settle the debate once and for all, right?
Well, it didn't. Despite massive document dumps from 1994 all the way through to 2022, countless files remain partially redacted. Vital paragraphs are blacked out, and certain documents are still completely withheld under the broad umbrella of national security. For a lot of people, the government's continued secrecy, even 60 years later, only validates the suspicions of those who believe we really aren't being told the whole story.
Which leaves us with one final, lingering question. With so much information still hidden behind thick black ink, will the fully unredacted files ever truly see the light of day? Or is the geopolitical reality of the 1960s so complex, and the events in Dallas so thoroughly muddied, that the assassination of John F. Kennedy is destined to forever remain America's darkest murder mystery? It's a question that really challenges our trust in history itself. Thanks for joining me on this explainer today. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll catch you on the next one.